morning, everybody.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. It is a beautiful day, right?
It is. I mean, it is 70 degrees on November 9th. I think the probability of that occurring was like 1 in 100 million, something really, really off.
Some stat we'll make up.
Yeah, but I'm enjoying it. I feel like I'm back in California again because these were November mornings similar to my California life. But
very nice.
Yeah, but I hear it's going to change. So get ready, get those winter coats ready, because I do think that towards the end of the week, we're going to see the real world of November coming back to us.
I would just like to enjoy the 77 degrees while we have it, please.
Absolutely.
So before we start thinking about the winter coats. So let's get started. Thank you for joining us. Week 5, why was exposure so important, Amy?
So exposure was so important because the week before we talked a little bit about your brand and developing it, but then exposure really takes us into the idea of how do I get out in front of as many people in my sphere of influence or people that I know or potentially want to get to know, and let them know about who I am and what I do, and that I am in real estate and I would love to work with them.
Yeah, if they don't know who you are or what you're doing, how are they going to hire you or refer you? It's basic. So let's look at the feedback we got from last week when the survey went out. Now, here's the key about the survey. In the past, we've asked the question about what successes have you experienced? What has been going well? This time, we asked the question, what are you planning to do? And we asked you to be specific. So when you filled out the survey, if you were specific, thank you so much for the detail. What we were looking to see is how you were planning to create exposure going through the rest of 2020 so that you can really pump it up for 2021. So let's look at some of the people that responded and shout outs we have to give. The first here is Danielle Rose from Libertyville. So congrats, Danielle. We asked that question, what are your plans? And so she commented a couple of things. She wants to up her marketing exposure by being more involved in the community. And that's something we did talk about last week. In fact, Thad last Wednesday talked about how the best buzz is by doing things for others. So congrats, Danielle. Now, what we're gonna do, Danielle, is we're gonna reach back out to you and see how this went, what you've been doing, and we want the specifics. So remember, you may have answered in the survey, and this goes out to everybody, not just Danielle. You may have answered in the survey. We want the specifics on how you are going to create more exposure so that we can follow up and make sure that you're doing it, because you will be more successful, clearly.
Yes, so let's talk about Liz Badgernath out of the Oak Park office. She has actually been working with marketing over the past week to develop a direct mail campaign. So same thing, Liz decided to take action and figure out, how do I create a plan for consistent exposure? So she intends to have a mailer sent out in the next week or two. And again, this is a great baseline. So we talked and asked a little bit more about what else she's thinking about doing. She also reached out to Beyond Hunger, which is a great organization that provides hunger relief programming to residents of Cook County. And this is awesome. She donated a week of her vacation home for their silent auction. So these are some great things to get out, create exposure for her brand. And Liz, same thing. We're going to want to follow up with you and see how things are going now that you're taking some additional steps to creating exposure in front of your sphere of influence.
Yes, congrats, Liz. And third, Henna Covisto. And so she's from the East Lincoln Park office. And so what she did is she outlined some things that she's already done and how she's taken action in terms of creating more exposure. And here's what's interesting about Henna, and I think it's something we can all, or most of us can relate to, which is taking that step for the personal outreach, the individual one-on-one calls, the individual texts. And so here's some things she's done to be able to get some more exposure, including after a testimonial went out, reaching out to that person that left the testimonial and reaching out to others from Facebook. So Henna, congrats on doing this. Now, what we're going to ask from Henna is to follow up on how this has been consistent. Because remember, when we talk about exposure, one of the keys in creating exposure is consistency. So thanks, Henna, for your great response.
And then Donna Plank from the Park Ridge office. Congratulations, Donna. Again, taking a step to create some consistency by signing up for the monthly mailer program. So she said she's really excited about the future and the possibilities for exposure and referrals by adding this simple touch that is now going to hit her 240 people 12 times in a year or once a month. But I want to ask you this, Donna, and actually a lot of you who have probably taken the same step in the past week as Donna has or Liz has, is now you've created your baseline opportunity. What are you then going to do? I really encourage you to take that 33 touch worksheet that we provided to you last week and start outlining what you're going to do beyond the baseline. What are the quarterly outreaches that you're going to set up for 2021? And then what are those 5 special touches that you are going to do to get in front of your sphere and make a huge difference when it comes to exposure?
And remember, what we talked about last week, and specifically on Friday, is being everywhere. So a lot of us now maybe have the monthly mailer set up. Have we engaged with AdWorks? Do we have the plan to continue ramping up the exposure so that it doesn't stop with one place, one thing? It's really so that the people that know you, and in Donna's case, 240 people see her everywhere. So congrats, everybody. You get a
$50 Visa gift card. Remember, use it on you, but try to use it locally. Support local businesses if and when you can.
So let's talk about week 6, your value proposition. This is super important, and I think it's something that a lot of us, we don't spend enough time talking about, crafting, working on, and it's something that really will impact our business, and not necessarily just immediately, but down the road, as we'll talk about.
So let's recap where we've been. So 2 weeks ago, we started talking about defining your brand, what that looks like, what your core values are as they exist or relate to your business. What do you stand for? What do you want to make sure the people who are in front of your brand know about you? And what is your mission statement? We also then talked about creating great exposure for your brand last week. That's, again, setting the baseline, postcards, the monthly newsletter, setting it and forgetting it, then rolling into more intentional and targeted outreach to make sure that your brand is everywhere. But now that you've created that brand, now you've got a plan for exposure. Now let's look at your brand's value proposition. Because here's the thing. If somebody suddenly sees you and decides they want to pick up the phone and give you a call, and maybe they want to talk to you about listing their home, guess what? Now you have to articulate why they should work with you. And that is your value proposition. And that's what we want to hone in on this week.
So what is a value proposition? It's the promise of what you are going to deliver. It is a promise to them of how you are going to take them where they want to go, how you're going to create success for them. And it is the primary reason someone would work with you. So when we talk about a value proposition, think about it as being the answer to the question, why should I hire you? As basic as that. We know every seller and every buyer thinks that. Why should I hire you? So this is going to be the answer to that question.
And it's really important to break it down into a couple of different components. And we've provided some really great worksheets for you this week to dial into that. So you want to effectively sell your own value, but you must have the right balance of what we like to call MAC. That is mindset, ability, courage, and knowledge. Really important for you to start breaking these down and taking a look at these 4 components and see where you are right now today and things that you need to do to make sure that your MAC value is increased.
So with your mindset, this is the belief in your value, the belief you can actually get what you're worth. This is you going in, believing that you should be there and that you should be working with this client.
And then there's just ability, and that is your capability to go in and sell that value. Now, here's the thing with ability. Today, you might feel like, oh, my ability is not that strong. Practice can absolutely help your ability to sell your value.
Then courage, to tell them what you are worth and actually stand your ground when it comes to that, meaning that we don't come off as desperate, needy, willing to take anything when it comes to commission or price or property condition or anything that we're not, that we walk in courageous enough to be able to walk out without working with that client, if need be.
And then also knowledge. You've got to know your stuff. You have to have knowledge of your stats and your differentiators. You need to have knowledge of the market, but you need to be able to go in confidently, having them recognize you're the expert. So when we talk about the value statement, most brokers have what is needed to create a value statement, whether it's the ability or the experience and the confidence to be successful. But the opportunity here is that what this does is when we have a strong value statement, we have the ability to grow and strengthen our business because we are going to not only capture the person that's in front of us, but also be able to create a tree of referrals that we'll talk about in just a moment
But the idea here is that when we craft a value statement, it has a much larger impact than what is immediately in front of us.
And it's important to understand what this value statement should be. This is not a 12-page monologue of how fabulous you are. We all know that you are. But this statement is between 30 seconds and 1 minute, and it sets the trajectory of each relationship. So I almost want you to think about it like an elevator pitch. If somebody walks into an elevator, turns to Kevin and says, Kevin, God, my current broker is absolutely awful. Why should I work with you? Kevin should be able to tell me in 30 seconds to 1 minute why I should work with him. And that isn't something we always know just right away. So creating your value statement is something that you need to take time to do, to focus on, and then practice.
So depending on what you articulate, every person you're speaking with derives something else. They draw their own conclusion based on what you're saying. So if it's not what you really mean to convey, or we're not saying it clearly, they're drawing their own conclusion, ideas on what you are promising to do with them.
And you have to also make sure that you examine your client presentation. So let's think about the perfect listing presentation, or we also had the perfect buyer strategies. Those are two really great classes that we offer to you throughout the year that allows you to take a step back and say, you know, how well am I articulating my value to these potential clients? Because these will help determine how each client perceives your value, your expertise, and your ability.
Yes, and then examine your client presentations. What this means is you may have the best value statement in the world, but is the collateral, is your presentation backing it up? Are you able to sit with a client and use your process to be able to clearly show them with collateral that reflects the success you've created in the past and the promise you are making now to them? Does your collateral reflect that? And I know we have great tools at Properties. We have the listing presentation, we have the buyer books. Sometimes we make our own, but what do they look at? Take a good look at this, because remember, it's just like if you take a used car back to a lot to sell it. If it isn't clean, if it doesn't look great, you will get less for that car. It's similar here. If your presentations aren't great, you can say anything you want about what success you're going to create, but the confidence they will have in you will be diminished if your product, if what you're showing them, the presentation isn't top notch.
And let's talk about what's really on the line here as well. When you're sitting down with a potential client, if you create success for them, what is that going to bring to you down the road? That is going to bring referral opportunity. And when you're looking at our business in real estate, you need to recognize and be able to build and develop new referral branches. That is how you create success for yourself, because it is a compounding effect of you creating success for one person today that may lead to them referring 5, 10, 15, 20 clients to you down the road. So think about your value statement. It's important for the person that's in front of you, because it also determines what kind of trajectory will I have down the road for future referral opportunity.
So what's at stake here? Really, it's really what Amy just outlined. If your presentation, if your value statement, if you're not clear on what value you provide and it's mediocre, they are going to, again, take and use their own perception, their own perspective. They're going to derive their own conclusions, and they're going to be compelled to follow their own fears, their own wants and needs, as opposed to taking your expert advice. So this value statement isn't just about capturing the client. It's also what happens down the road.
And think about it, your value statement has to have them believe that you really are the expert in the situation. Because the minute that wavers, then they start thinking they know more than you. And think about it, if you have a bad transaction with a client, I was just speaking about the trajectory of referrals and referral branches. If you break this relationship, all opportunity for ongoing or continued referrals has been broken. So, figuring out the realization that you cannot be mediocre. So if you're sitting there right now thinking, my value proposition isn't as strong as I'd like it to be, then great. That's what this week is for you to focus on what is at stake and how to create success by upping that value proposition.
And remembering, to back up what Amy said, we've talked in the past 5 weeks about working with family and friends as well. When it says here, you must be clear on your value for each new client, this includes the people you already know well. Remember, they know you as a family member. They know you as a close friend. This is really key in outlining your value statement so they follow your advice, as opposed to thinking you're just a family member who doesn't know what they're doing but has a real estate license.
And the important thing on that note, Kevin, is they're not going to feel comfortable enough to call that out. They're not going to say to you, usually right in front of you, that we're a little bit hesitant or uncomfortable to work with you, Amy, because you're my sister-in-law or because we're such good friends. It is your responsibility to take the reins on that conversation, and you present it right in front of them and you own it and you say, listen, you may feel uncomfortable right now because we have such a great friendship. That is extremely important to me. And that's also why you're not going to get just 100% of what I do, but 110%. And I'm going to show you what I used to call it, like business Amy is going to be able to bring to the table, because friend Amy is going to step aside. But by you creating the opportunity to have that dialogue and make sure that they're comfortable, that you recognize the difference, that could be a key when it comes to working with friends and family.
And if you're keeping track, not to take us off track, there is Amy, there is business Amy, and there is Mean Gene.
Who's on her Peloton most times. That's right. So what value does a value statement deliver? It compels your clients to take action. You want to be able to tell them what you're going to do for them, and then you want to move them to yes. You want them to say that they want to move forward and work with you. Your words will compel them to hire you, to follow your advice, and then after you've created success for them, they're going to refer you to others.
Yeah, and if you don't convey what you're doing, they're going to view you as anybody else in the market. If they don't know what value you're providing and you haven't outlined how your expertise is driving success, then they don't understand it. They assume that you are like every other agent or broker out there. And so what happens then, if they're not aware of your value and the differentiation, they don't have a need to refer you. They don't have a reason to refer you. There's not a reason to be proud of who they're working with because they feel like you are like everybody else.
And remember, don't assume that they know. Remember, it's our job to make sure they know what we do. It's not their job to remember what we do.
Right.
So the elements of an indelible value statement. The first thing that it does when you create an amazing value statement is it establishes your credibility and your expertise, while also demonstrating that working with you is going to increase their or your prospects' likelihood of success.
And the second is that it differentiates you from the competition. This is really key. A value statement should not be something that everybody else in the market can say. Available 24/7, I will work tirelessly for you, I love my job. Those sort of things are not differentiators. So the key in a value statement is that when you state it, you convey it, they actually understand how you are different from every other broker within the market.
And it also makes the prospect want to hire you immediately. Let's face it, how many of us have all been on competitive listing presentations? And have we ever been in that scenario where whatever we articulated was so liked by who we were sitting in front of, they decided to hire us on the spot? I know many of you have had that. I know I was lucky enough to have that a few times in my career, but it's about, narrowing in on something that they recognize. And so they want to hire you immediately. And it's really just a concise message that they then will be able to turn around and tell others in the months to follow why they decided to work with you.
Make it easy for them to make the decision. Why not? Put the time and effort into where they actually feel like it's a detriment to themselves if they don't hire you. Take the decision for them out of it. Make it so compelling that the obvious and only answer is yes.
So what we're going to talk about are the keys to focus on when articulating your value statement. Kevin and I have just been saying, you need to keep it short. You need to make sure that it's kind of compact with a lot of great details, but also something really easy for a client to re-articulate to somebody else. So there's 3 things you want to think about as you're developing your value statement. That's numbers, stats, and ratios, your unique differentiator, and then I love this one, the power of 3.
Yes. So let's talk about numbers, stats, and ratios. An easy way to pull your numbers, if you don't know them, an easy way to pull a list of everything you've done from the MLS is to go to your transactions, narrow down to closed. There's a filter, a drop down there, and you'll be able to pull down all of your closed transactions in the MLS. But this is why this is so important. People believe stats. Numbers add credibility to what you are able to provide. They add credibility to your success. It may be one thing for us to say we're number 1 or we've done all these. If you can back it up with stats, that is more impactful and it eliminates skepticism. The second thing about numbers, stats, and ratios and all these things, again, if you don't know them and someone else does, it puts you in a negative position. So the key is, and what we all understand, what most of us know, is that most of us do not know all of our stats, numbers, and ratios. So this is a key differentiator. If you're able to walk in and talk with someone about very specifically the success that you've been able to create, great. And here's the thing. If you're newer in the business, or your stats aren't that great, there's something that isn't compelling. Number one, choose the stats that are, but number two, look at how it compares to the market. Because if you can say that you are beating the market by X% or by 17 days on market or by whatever the stat is that you've pulled, that is compelling, even if the actual stat isn't compelling. You can make data stats and these ratios work for you, but you have to be able to know them in order to do so.
So your unique differentiator. So we talked a lot about numbers and stats, but there's also a lot of things that are really unique to you. And you want to identify your unique skills, the knowledge and the experience that you bring to the table. And back to the idea of maybe you're newer in the business. That's okay. Your unique differentiators can be pulled from things you've done before getting into real estate. For example, maybe you were an attorney prior to getting your real estate license and you did a lot of negotiating. And so maybe you're really strong and that's a really good skill set that you bring to the table. Then that might be one of your unique differentiators. And you want to figure out how to articulate that and storytell using ways in which you used your negotiating skills to impact others. So just think about your different skill sets, whether you're extremely analytical because you have a finance background, everything that you have done up until getting into real estate or your time in real estate brings skills, knowledge, and experience that you can articulate and will uniquely differentiate you.
And the third in this list is the power of three. So a lot of times when we start talking and we want to convey our value, we start laundry listing things. Once we start talking, sometimes people can't stop us. And we're sitting in the office across the table from them, telling them all these random things. Here's the deal. People can understand, follow, and repeat three things. So when you're coming up with your value statement, it's great to make the laundry list of all of the ways that you can convey your value, all of the different experiences, stats, as Amy said, past experience in different industries that translates into being able to create success in real estate. Put it all down, but choose the top three that are the most impactful. When you choose those top three, those should be the ones that are most compelling into convincing a seller or buyer as to why they should work with you.
So I want to talk about the three elephants that your value will always be addressing. If any of you have taken my perfect listing presentation class, then we've talked about these. And I actually have included a lot of the script work that we had in PLP 2.0 in this week's set of worksheets. But the first elephant that we're going to come across whenever we are sitting down with a potential seller is price. Do they trust you enough to trust your pricing recommendation? We've all been in the room where we've had a seller who thinks they know more about the market than we do. Part of your value proposition as it leads up to this conversation is not just telling them what your value is, but showing them from the first conversation to the walkthrough to everything you're doing in between. So by the time you're sitting down and talking about price, they see the value that you bring to the table. They trust what you're going to say, and odds are, hopefully, they're going to move into your direction when it comes to price.
And then commission. Do they feel like you're worth it? Do they feel like you're valuable enough to pay the 6% or 5.5% or 5% when there are others offering a different commission? Do they feel like the success you are going to create? Do they feel like your experience that you have? Do they feel like the success that you've created in the past for others is worth that commission? So they're always going to have this in the back of their head. We have to make sure that our value is going to back up why we are charging the commission that we do.
And then the last piece is competition. How do you, it should say stack, but it says stash up next to the other brokers. Wow, what was I on when I was writing that sentence? How do you stack up next to the other brokers they are going to be meeting with? Every time you are engaging with a client or a potential client, whether it's a buyer or a seller, you have to assume that you are in competition with others. So you have to think about how your value statement compares to other competitive real estate brokers in the marketplace and be able to know, back to stats and numbers, how that might play into somebody's decision. So always knowing that there will be competition as you try to gain business.
And I'm sure that's autocorrect, I think we'll say. The Stasha.
Stasia, yes.
All right, so but the message is clear, right? So tomorrow we're going to continue the discussion about value statement on coffee. So remember, the link is going to be out by 9:30 a.m. It's not live. You don't have to register for anything. It's going to be a video link that you can watch at your leisure.
And we are really excited to be talking about developing your value proposition with our special guest, Tom Downing. So Tom had sold for about 6.5 years in our particular marketplace. He actually came from another market in Minnesota. His first year in real estate in Chicagoland, he was a Rolex recipient. He also successfully formed one of @Property's top performing teams, and he has now just recently become an addition to our management team. He is the managing broker out of Winnetka. So we are excited to have Tom come and talk to us about, value proposition. It was a lot of what he had to put together when he was selling, and whether you are kind of newer to the business, he knew what that obstacle looked like. Or if you're trying to expand and grow your business and grow into a team, he's got some great insight that we want to share with you tomorrow on coffee.
Yeah, that's great. Really looking forward to it. And so we've put together a packet of all the resources for your success when it comes to what we're doing and talking about this week.
Yep, so there's 4 things for you to take a look at. The first is going to be your broker growth worksheet. And this is going to be you focusing on what you think your value proposition is right now. Then you're going to go through the exercise of pulling out all of those really significant things about you. And then it has you rewrite that value statement with some of your greatest strengths and differentiators. Then we've got the MAC analysis worksheet for you. Remember, that's mindset, ability, courage, and knowledge. Breaking out where you are right now on a level of 1 to 10 and seeing where you might want to hone in and focus. Then we've got the seller interview questions. What these questions are the questions that you would essentially give to a seller to say, ask any potential real estate professional to answer these. Your exercise, though, is to go through and look at all of those questions and make sure that if you were asked any of them, you would be able to answer them. And if you can't today, then let's figure out and work on how you can go through each and figure out what your answer would be. And then the last thing we've included, I took a subset of the scripts that we've done in our perfect listing class. And this is a lot of the language that you can use as you're trying to articulate your value to a potential client. So we really hope you find all of this information really helpful this week.
And it's in the Agent app. So if you go to the featured post in the Agent app, this packet is there, along with, in advance, the packet for the Ninja session on Thursday. Make it a great day, and remember,
love yourself,
love others,
and love what you do.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, guys.